mammoth tree, the past had been recorded. It's estimated that we are only aware of 3% of the animals that have walked this earth. Occasionally, something happens and reminds us that our past is 97% mystery. This is one of those stories.
Look, the bone's dribbling all the way down this slope.
This is Dr. James A. Jensen, a vertebrate paleontologist from Brigham Young University. On Dry Mesa in the mountains of western Colorado, his rockhound friends Eddie and Vivian Jones had discovered a giant dinosaur toe bone. Now they've returned to see if any additional bones could be found.
Down through the loose upper surface to see where it's in place. Go like this. I'll just carry this on up the ways here. Now there's a white layer. Yellow. Getting into this. Look now, here, I think this looks good. You know that bone occurs in this kind of gravelly material more often than not. Yeah, here's a piece. Here it is.
Yeah,
look,
yeah, you're getting into the level of it.
Look, it runs over this way. The level probably goes right along here.
Yeah,
Let me scrape this off here.
Oh, looks like you found.
It's not a rock. It's a bone.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Hey,
See
wow.
the shaft comes out. This is the joint end here. I don't know if that's a femur or not. If so, this is the knee end. Let's see how far back.
I don't know how you do it.
You're lucky.
Oh, this is spreading out here.
Hey, Eddie, look at this.
Yeah.
See how it's flaring out? You know what that looks like?
Oh, Christ.
Well, that is a bone.
You know, see how it's expanding here? That looks like a great big tibia.
Jim could tell immediately that this was going to be one of the most exciting dinosaur discoveries ever made. Accordingly, he made plans for a big quarry operation the following spring. April 14th, and the assault began. With everything from air chisels to transistor radios, they were armed for anything but the change in altitude and a late winter storm.
The edge of the hill comes along like this. Now the bone layer goes along about like this. Now we'll cut in with the cat starting up here, cut down like this, just above, ending just above the bone layer. This material here will be removed and pushed out over the edge.
A cut was made along the side of a hill about the length of a football field. With Jim watching carefully, Doug inched the 8-ton caterpillar closer to the fragile bone layer. Finally, the blade turned up the first bone fragment. Below this spot lay the heaviest bone concentration discovered. Having at last struck bone, the work changes pace.
This bone's laying here protected by the rock that it's in, but once we get it uncovered like this, it's necessary to harden it up with shellac. And after it's been shellacked, hardened up well, then the thing will be plastered out.
The bones must be plastered to protect them from further deterioration until they can be worked on in the lab. The soft soil, though easy to work in, has made the bones vulnerable.
I can get some plaster mixed up here and get a jacket on that thing, maybe. Soak these up good so that they...
Yeah, I bet that poor old dinosaur didn't know he was going to be treated that nice.
Put a cast on him.
This area over here where we began work has already produced evidence of 2 new species. Now that makes the quarry worth it, just that alone. 1 new species justifies a quarry. That we have represented a long bone here of a herbivore, and just a few feet away is part of the pelvis of a carnivore. Now, neither one of those can be found in any of the scientific literature I have. In fact, I'm quite well acquainted with this type carnivore that is similar And this is something new. Over in this area here, we have some limb bones of another carnivore, and we found some crocodile teeth there and some turtle shell fragments. These are out of the foot of a herbivore. This is a medium-sized herbivore. This one is a very large one. These two bumps here correspond with those two bumps there.
How does he know that bone comes from a herbivore or plant eater instead of a carnivore? There are many clues. Take these two bones. The one on the right is a plant eater. The one on the left is a meat eater. Notice the difference in texture. The plant eater is rough and porous, where the meat eater is more smooth and solid. This will affect the way they weather, which is another clue. The plant eater bones will disintegrate more rapidly. The third clue is in the joints. Animals that are more active must have more movement in their joints. Like the elephant and the lion. The elephant doesn't have to move very fast to get his dinner, but the lion does. Carnivores, like the lion, are more agile, thus more pronounced movement in their joints.
This bone here, this rusty-looking bone, is a carnivore. Has well-developed condyles on this end and a knob on the top end.
You're probably thinking they need to find the entire skeleton, but they don't. Every age has its own junkyard and its own dinosaurs. Take the 20th century dinosaur. How would you reassemble its remains? Would you have to find every part to tell what it looked like? No, that's because this creature is symmetrical. The right half looks like the left. If you find the right door to a certain model, you will know what the left door looks like. If you find only one taillight, you can easily recreate the other. It's a mirror image. The same thing is true of fenders, brake drums, and many other parts. A dinosaur can be thought of in the same way. Its bones are divided into two groups. The center line bones shown here are basically the one-of-a-kind bones in the animal, like a driveline in a car. The second group of bones are the right-left bones, or the bones that are duplicated in the skeleton. Since they are duplicates, you need only find one. The point is obvious. The skeleton is a machine, and the quarry is a junkyard. This quarry was an ancient part of a riverbed. The animals died and were washed downstream where the remains became jumbled and broken. The evidence can be seen here. These bones are piled up like pickup sticks, and the patterns that they have formed through the force of the water show the direction of the stream flow. It's hard to imagine that these hills were once part of a vast, flat floodplain with meandering estuaries, lush foliage, and huge creatures.
This bone that's been chewed on by the carnivore. And on this end, at this angle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the teeth marks went across this way. And they were probably as sharp as my ice pick.
Can I have a picture of that, Jim?
Certainly, yes. There are also some teeth on the backside because the animal grasped it like this, with upper and lower jaws.
At last, significant carnivore material began to surface in the quarry. The first animal, though close in size to the Tyrannosaurus rex, is noticeably different. Dr. Nacho Minura of Hokkaido University in Japan has come to examine the material.
Right in this area right here is where we found most of this large carnivore material. And I'll lay it out here to compare with the known form. The humerus, ulna, radius, and by comparison, here's the tremendous humerus of the new form. Notice the shaft is straight, whereas in Antrodemus it has quite a curve to it. This is the most distinguishing characteristic about it. Now the ulna here
Oh, much.
for the new one and radius.
Yes.
Now,
Much shorter.
one of the dramatic things is the short length
Yes.
of the ulna. Notice on Antrodemus, the ulna is 3/4 the length of the humerus. In this case, the new form, it's only half the length of the
Yes,
humerus.
certainly.
Besides that, when comparing the two, notice it's shorter than the known form, but much heavier,
Heavy,
much
yes,
stronger
yes,
naturally.
yes.
So we would say, in describing this as a new genus, that this form has an extremely short forearm, which gives it tremendous power. Now, in the book here, let's look at the figure. We have an illustration of the complete skeleton of the known form, Antrodemus. Now, the differences between this and what I found is primarily a very short forearm. Mine has a claw on the forehand here, which is 12.5 inches long. We have also discovered the lower jaw of this new form. It has only half the number of teeth this form has. This means it'll have a very short skull, which in a way has something mechanically to do with the very short forearm. We've also found part of the hips, and they also have different characteristics. This is one of the most interesting discoveries that's been made in the Jurassic, in this part of the world at least.
The carnivore discoveries were these: a few neck vertebrae and a section of the short jaw. Like most dinosaurs, the teeth were constantly being replaced. Here, a new tooth can be seen breaking the surface. Each tooth is serrated like a steak knife, so that the flesh can easily be stripped from the bone. Next, a section of ribs and the powerful arms with foot-long claws.
This means much stronger and much greater as Tyrannosaurus.
A lower leg and foot bones were found.
This is the big foot bone down near the ankle. This is the heel bone. A couple of toe bones. See how solid that one is? There's not a crack in it.
And finally, a section of the upper hip and a length of tail. Though this information may seem sketchy, by knowing usual bone ratios, the other proportions can also be determined.
And see what we have in this part of the quarry. We removed a lot of overburden here and have something very unusual exposed here. We'll step right up over.
But the carnivore was only the beginning. For while they'd been digging, other bones, herbivore bones, began to indicate something incredible, an animal no one could have expected.
This is the pelvis of an enormous dinosaur. I'm spanning the width of it. Left side and the right side. This is the middle line here. The tail would go back between my legs. Now the spines that stick up in the middle, such as you have down your back, are lying here, and if you were to raise them up and stand them here, they'd be in their normal position. They were crushed during burial. This bone sticking out here, that's this corner of your hip right here, the left corner. Now from this corner to that one over there, which is broken off, is 6 feet. So if his hips are 6 feet wide, then his stomach is forward of that, you see. And we have some vertebrae of this dinosaur in another part of the quarry, and some of them are 40 inches long, one vertebrae. This part right here is where the spinal column fastens on. That's part of the vertebrae right there, and the spinal cord went through this little hole right here. Okay, you ready back there? We'll go over easy now.
This is the enormous pelvis in its jacket. Plastered out, it now weighs more than 3 tons.
Coming good, go ahead.
First, it must be turned and plastered on the reverse side. A whole day spent lifting just one bone onto the truck, and the quarry is still full of bones. Safely loaded on the lowboy trailer, the bone will now make the 300-mile journey to the museum in Provo, Utah, where it will await scientific classification and eventual assembly.
Yeah,
I think this counter's telling you got something under here.
you and your aluminum ear, Eddie.
Yeah, but by golly, I believe it means it this time.
Well, I got some...
Because dinosaur bones are radioactive, Eddie had been dragging his Geiger counter all over the quarry. Jim dismissed him at first, for his finds were always ahead of a digging. This time, though, Jim's son Ron suspected that he might be right and uncovered something that amazed the entire world.
Hey, look at this, Kim. What in the world have you got there? I don't know, man. It's huge.
Collarbone.
How big?
Oh, 8 feet long.
A shoulder blade had jammed against a cuttle in the riverbed. It was the largest bone ever known to exist on a land animal.
How about that?
Hey, you weren't kidding, were you?
Yeah, I'm from Missouri, and I see it, and I still can't believe it.
No, that's
the biggest bone's ever
that's
been found,
probably
isn't
the
it?
biggest single bone, length of bone that anyone's seen on Earth.
It must be.
Isn't that tremendous?
Gosh, that's unbelievable, Jim. Is there any animal that could have had anything like that, Jim?
Well, that big pelvis down there, it's just like a
Yeah.
sidewalk.
Oh, for crying out loud.
It isn't quite 8 feet long, though, is it, really?
yeah.
It is. It's big.
measure it.
Getting close.
That's large enough to go with that tremendous 6-foot pelvis we have down there. You'd have to have a scapula like this, Eddie, to carry all that.
Look at the width
Yeah,
of that thing.
that's right. Well, you had to have enough strength to carry all that weight.
Jeez.
That big carcass, standing on its front leg, all the weight of this tremendous animal rests on that. The front end of the 60-ton animal.
60 tons.
Yeah, 100 pounds more or less. But anyway,
How high?
well, about 50 feet probably. It'd be 60 feet long, but it'd stand about 50 feet tall because of the weight. The height. With these long neck vertebrae. It was like a giraffe. These neck vertebrae, remember that how thin it was?
Yeah.
That vertebrae is built like a Japanese lantern. It's made for being held high in the air. So the front legs are the same length as the back ones, made it easy for him to travel over land, like a big wheeled vehicle.
Man, if you ever got a sore throat, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, you sure would.
Combined with earlier discoveries, a picture began to emerge. One neck vertebrae alone was 5 feet long. If this were the largest, the entire neck would have to be at least 40 feet, the length of a semi-truck. With the discovery of the 8-foot shoulder blade, 3 ribs, the 6-foot wide pelvis, and 2 sections of vertebrae, the entire skeleton can be approximated. To fully understand it, we need to compare him with his fellow sauropods, the most well-known being Brontosaurus. And although he is commonly thought to be the largest of dinosaurs, he is relatively small compared to the Brachiosaurus. The Brachiosaurus stands 42 feet high and defies what many scientists had thought to be the skeletal structural limits. In his laboratory, Jim has a snapshot of a man standing beneath a full-scale Brachiosaurus. Surely this must be the largest of dinosaurs. And for better than 75 years, it was. Then came the Dry Mesa Quarry. The animal found here is so much larger than anything ever dreamed of, the press, for lack of scientific name, called it a Supersaurus. The animal was so large that when they discovered it, they underestimated its size. It turned out to be at least 55 feet high, over 100 feet from nose to tail, and instead of 60 tons, it weighed close to 100 tons. He was so big that he would fill a basketball court. He was taller than a 5-story building. He was heavier than 33 elephants. And if you lived in his stomach, you'd have to stand on a stepladder to change the light globe.
Jim, I'm going to need to take a meter reading here and check it out. Okay.
Is this okay for this?
That's fine.
It was an AP newsman who broke the story to the world. Time and Life followed. Reader's Digest ran the story, and National Geographic, one of the quarry sponsors, began an article. Dry Mesa was no longer an obscure hillside, for after the news broke, the tourists came, more than Jim had ever imagined. From every corner of the land and every cranny of the quarry, they just kept coming till Jim was literally tourist-trapped. But with the countless visitors came many scientists, among them one of the world's foremost sauropod specialists, Dr. John S. McIntosh.
Tremendous. I don't think I was ready for something absolutely astonishing, but as usual with Jim's quarries, this just beat anything. I think, scientifically speaking, the most exciting thing is the new carnivore. To find an absolutely brand new carnivore is really very surprising. Now, the sauropods are what I am more interested in, and so my heart beats a good deal faster when I look at the great big scapula and the huge neck vertebrae that go with it. It's very, very possible that this new animal is the largest, because the scapula is just absolutely so much bigger than anything I've ever seen and that I've ever even heard of.
Meteorologists are anticipating an earlier fall this year, which may be an indication of an exceptionally cold winter.
At this altitude, spring comes late and winter comes early. Jim and his crew were so involved with the toil of getting the bones out and sharing the excitement of discovery with the rush of visitors to the quarry that the end of the working season came unexpectedly. Since dinosaur bones are fragile and are easily destroyed by the forces of weather, the last task is to secure the remaining bones from the elements. This year, nearly 18 tons of material have been removed. But the numerous discoveries have left many questions unanswered and many puzzles unsolved. Jim is anxious to return in future seasons, for the work at Dry Mesa Quarry has really just begun.
He went to the mountain, found pages of the earth. They were crying out someone to read them to the world. One page told of beauty, another told of strength, and it left in fascination as one page told the story of giants in the